Welcome to the fourth and final for this series. It may be making a comeback in the autumn, we hope so, of ageing well. How do we turn the problem, in inverted commas, of ageing into the most promising opportunity of the 21st century? So a little bit of background on this event. The All Party Parliamentary Group for Longevity was set up in March 2019 and states its aim as to address the scientific, technological and socio-economic issues relating to our ageing demographic and promote living younger, healthier and longer lives. Interesting sentence. We've got to unpack that one over the next hour and a half, haven't we? So this webinar will explore current projects already embody this way of thinking. We'll look at what's needed to bring this change on large scale and what this signals about the way we need to think about ageing in the future. I mean, that's been a key theme over the last three sessions, is what is old? How should we age constructively, proactively? You know, let's be honest, we're all very privileged to be aging. Many of us are of an age that would have been seen as being unusual a few hundred years ago. So let's celebrate that. And if you've missed any of the previous recordings, all the discussions are on the Possibility Club. So there are 3 of the webinars and there's also 3 podcasts. So lots of conversations, lots of opinions, food for thought, debates. This is a topic that isn't all roses. You know, we are being very realistic in our perception of aging. It's been enlightening, at times quite concerning, but above all, it's really constructive. We're ensuring we talk honestly about what aging looks like, what old really is, how to age individually. You know, we don't all want to go bungee jumping in our 90s, but we may not all want to do knitting. You know, that we are individuals. We don't get to a certain age and become like a mass, mind. How to take the things we all do and evolve them as we age forward, and look at our priorities and see it being something to engage proactively rather than to avoid. You know, what can we do from our 20s to make sure that we age well going forward, which seems horrific. You know, you don't think about getting old when you're 20, but you know, if you're lucky, you will do. So all of these pieces, and also the great opportunity of this aging society from a commercial perspective. You know, we're going to be talking about all these different areas. So we have a fantastic panel, and the way this works is I'm going to ask all of our panel to introduce themselves, get a little bit of a background, so then we've got presentations, and then we're going to go into more of a panel discussion. But while we're speaking, while the panelists are speaking, do feel free to use the chat to ask questions. This is a conversation. And also, rather you ask questions in the moment when that question is live, rather than waiting until later when it might lose a little bit of its purpose. So let me just tell you who the speakers are, and then we can crack on from listening to them. So we have Eric Kilstrom, the UK Ambassador for Ageing 2.0. The Ageing 2.0 network is creating an innovation ecosystem with startups, government, MNCs, industry and academia and the third sector. And Eric was one of my guests on my last podcast, which has gone live this week, which was great fun. We ran out of time. So if you want to listen back to that, please do. We also then have Natasha Slutskaya, who's a senior lecturer in human resource management in the Business School at the University of Sussex. Colin Lowe, director, the Design Age Institute at the Royal College of Art, London. Colin's a senior design leader with significant track record in developing inclusive products and services in the public, private and charitable sectors. And we are hoping to have Graham Peters, the chair of Team East Sussex, the county's local federated board for the South East Local Economic Partnership. Poor Graham was having a couple of tech challenges, so we hope he's joining us. If we don't get to Graham, we will share his details with you after the event. So that's our community our panel going forward. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce you. Should we start with Colin? Colin, do you want to go first?
Thumbs up if you can all see that.
Perfect.
Perfect, yeah. So thank you, Lucy. As Lucy mentioned, I'm Colin Menzies-Lowe. I'm the director of the Design Age Institute at the Royal College of Art. And there's a photograph of myself on the right, aged 74. And through one of those little devices or apps you can get. And if we get time at the end, depending on how quickly I talk, I'll explain why that's important to us and to me. We're quite a new institute. We've been set up to become the National Strategic Unit for Design and the Healthy Aging Economy. We're a partnership funded by Research England of the Oxford Institute of Population Aging at Oxford University, the National Innovation Centre for Aging at Newcastle University, the International Longevity Centre and the Design Museum, and then of course the Helen Hamlin Centre at the Royal College of Art, which is us. And why have we been set up? Why is it important? This is my favourite graph that shows why this is an issue. For about 12,000 years, the average life expectancy of the global population remained relatively unchanged, bouncing around between 20 and 30 years, until about 200 years ago, when it just started to skyrocket. And while it might be leveling off a little bit over the last decade or so, given the advances in medicine and healthcare, we think there's no reason to believe why that is not going to continue for a period yet. And therefore, we have an aging population. In specifics, by 2040, 30 million people in the UK will be over 60. That's a marketplace of 30 million people, which is pretty significant. There'll also be a financial time bubble going through. By 2040, the over 55s will account for 63 pence in every pound spent. The over 50s already hold 70% of all household wealth. So this is a significant marketplace with wealth and spending power. And there'll also be technology proliferation. This is the third of our three-wave tsunami. 70% of older adults are now online, rising virtually to 100% by 2030. If indeed it is not there already by the time we get out of this pandemic and lockdown, the adoption of technology has been rapidly accelerated by that. So this is just going to change things, and it's going to change the way people buy and spend and how communities are built. And one of our issues is this myth, or not a myth as such, but the discussion and the agenda about aging seems to be all around illness, frailty and burden. And it is true that as we age, we become less able. It is just part of the natural aging process. But as far as we are concerned, until you cross a line of transition, going from able to unable, it's not important. In the human population, there is a whole range of abilities. And there's no reason to just talk about older adults as if that's their specific bag, because it isn't actually true. Only about a quarter of people over the age of 65 have any kind of difficulty or severe difficulty carrying out personal care or household activities, which means 3/4 of people over 65 have only a moderate or no disability at all or difficulty carrying out personal care or household activities. So this agenda about unable, disability, frailty is just inaccurate for the vast majority of this audience. So while we accept ability and how that dips off over time is important and cannot be ignored, we prefer to talk about interests. And again, there's a kind of a myth that people become less interested as they age, which again, we would say is untrue and is not substantiated by any evidence that we can find. People change their interest as they age. I personally am somewhat less interested in quite how skinny my jeans are these days and what is in the top 10. Should a top 10 even exist anymore? I don't know. But I am interested in things that are around me. I'm more interested in politics in my home and my garden and my career and other things that maybe younger people may or may not be interested in. So I don't think people become less interested. They just become interested in different things and maybe more focused. But we also like to talk about wisdom, that this idea that as you age, you do accrue experiences and knowledge and the opportunity to reflect on those experiences and knowledge and therefore hopefully make better decisions. And that is not to say that older people are wiser than younger people, or that by reaching the age of 65, suddenly wisdom is dropped upon you. It is only to say that the 54-year-old Mike Tyson is probably a much wiser man than the 18-year-old Mike Tyson, because he has had plenty of life experiences and in his particular case, plenty of opportunity to reflect on them and hopefully therefore making better, wiser decisions. We've also developed a framework for exploring life's transitions, this idea of going from being able to being unable or having resilience. And yes, physical is a very important one of them. My international rugby playing days, not that they ever started, are certainly over at the age of 54. That is not something that's going to happen. So yes, we have physical transitions during our life, but we also have mental transitions, whether that is some sort of recognized cognitive issue to do with dementia or any other area. We have transitions in terms of mental ability. But less talked about is social. When we are young, we have large social networks. We have friends, we have siblings and cousins and family and friends at school and friends at university and friends at work. And as you progress and get older, that becomes less so. particularly as your children might move away, your partner, your families might die. You very quickly can become socially isolated and not part of a community, and that has very negative consequences for your health and happiness. And then lastly, the fourth one we like to talk about is economic frailty or resilience. That as you are working and earning money, you have the ability to borrow, you have the ability to spend, you have lots of abilities that are taken away from you on the whole as you age. And therefore, economic frailty and transitions are just as important as the other three in defining a healthier, happier, longer life. And if you lose one of your leaves on your clover leaf, then you're at risk of needing some sort of support. If you lose two, then you're almost definitely being supported by someone, friends, family, or the state. If you lose three, then you're almost certainly dependent and with a very limiting quality of life. And if you lose four, then you're almost certainly in care, providing round-the-clock support. So it is important for us and what we do that we help people stay able in all four of these leaves for as long as possible. But we have to remember that people don't live alone. You know, these could be two people living together, one who could be physically frail and socially frail, but mentally and economically quite robust, living with somebody who could be physically robust and economically robust, but mentally and socially frail. And together, they actually form quite a robust couple living in their house. They seem to be able to cover all basic tasks of daily living and have each other to keep themselves company. If one of these people should either die or be taken into care or removed from the home, then they go from being really quite robust and not visible in terms of need to being really quite at risk and needing support and might even be dependent. So it's quite a complex situation. So this is one of the things we look at, and we ask ourselves, how do we help people maintain as much of these four leaves as possible? Is it pain avoidance or reward seeking? And the marketplace seems to be full of pain avoidance, you know, aids to help you get around when you become physically frail or mentally frail. But we would like to look more at reward seeking. We would like to target people who are a little bit younger. That is our brief. And to help them stay physically, mentally, socially, and economically robust by indulging in things that they enjoy doing, things that they like doing, reflecting their own interests, and using the wisdom that they've gained over the years to help them adopt products and services that help them stay independent for longer. And this is our real purpose in life. We want to use something like this cloverleaf to help people, you know, live longer, healthier, and happier at home, at work, and in the community. And as I said, we've only just been founded, so we haven't any case studies to show you just yet, but they are on the way. We probably have 1 minute left. I'll explain this. As a designer, I used to be design director of a Dementia Care property development company, and it was one of the the high-end developments for wealthy individuals, £1 million apartment dementia care facilities. And we started designing these so they would be good enough for our own mothers to live in. That was the brief. Make them good enough that you'd put your own mother there. We learned very quickly that people put their mothers in all sorts of horrible places, and it wasn't working. We ended up designing things that we weren't happy with. So we changed the brief. We changed our mantra. So these places have to be good enough that I would live in myself when I hit retirement and have an issue. And it did. That changed everything. So we build on the mantra at the Royal College of Art, not a mantra, an old program they had called Design for Your Future Selves. So we do always say to ourselves, if it isn't good enough for me, if I wouldn't buy it, why would you expect anybody else to? And it did change the way we think about things. I think that's me. Do you want to take questions now, or do you wait till the end?
I've got a couple, but I mean, in the chat, please do fire it in there. I really like the bringing joy to aging kind of. I made the note of putting a focus on emotional and physical intelligence earlier in life, so that we know, you know, you don't sort of let your niggly knee keep going. You look at how you can resolve that. Yeah. But that proactive management is something that's culturally quite challenging.
It is, and certainly we don't have the answers, but we do know how difficult it is. And we know, you know, you could look at smoking and alcohol and all sorts of things to see where the gains have taken place and understand the motivational change. But it's to encourage people, as you know, so if you're getting stiff, you can continue to get stiff and do nothing about it, or you can take up an activity that helps you stay flexible. But one, hopefully not, you know, and I don't mean to be insulting about anybody who offers services, but why do we assume that all 75-year-olds want to go ballroom dancing in the local church hall with a cup of tea, as opposed to doing Pilates or walking football or whatever else it is that actually might better mirror their interests and the things they did in their life before and their passions, and actually bring a bit of joy into their lives. So it's looking at people's interests and trying to reflect that in the services that we're designing.
And that's been a key theme of Don't Stereotype. We all want to age individually. We all want to be treated as individuals. So why is there this perception in society, you get over 65 and suddenly you get into crochet and comfortable shoes? You know, we're not saying you should all go skydiving, but yeah, just do what you want to do, what makes you happy. And as you say, if you want to be into the top 10 when you're 80 and, you know, really into Stormzy, fill your boots, do what makes you happy.
Yeah, absolutely.
But also do the things that will make your aging a happy one.
Yeah. So we're not suggesting if smoking and drinking alcohol makes you happy, we're going to promote that. You do that in your own time. But absolutely what you've just said, looking at things that we think will help you stay healthier and happier for longer, and providing services around that.
And you can look at the health in your family. So there's sort of, you can potentially see what might be on the horizon. There's osteoporosis in my family. So it's looking at what can I do to negate that? I don't know. I haven't got it yet, but I know that I might do. So therefore, you mentioned Pilates, you know, power plates. What can we do to invest in our future selves?
Exactly. That's it. It's designing and purchasing for our future selves.
I like the idea of that. And Eric made the comment about, is there more information to read on Cloverleaf? Is there a link you can put in the chat that we can maybe share on the Possibility Club? I know it's very new, but is there more if anybody's keen to investigate further?
So was that a question for me?
Yes.
Well, we have a website, and we have two things we have running at the minute. One is designage.org, which is our homepage, which shows you what we're trying to do and gives the whole message. And another is a community that we've set up to encourage storytelling and collecting information and creating a community around this whole issue, so people can, about positive stories of aging. And it's called thisagething.com, I believe, or .co, thisagething.co.
Oh. Annie Marie's popping those things down. We've got a question from Rob Scott for you as well, Colin. Why do you think the local authorities, developers and government have developed policies and business models that treat older people as one type of person? We've been making this point a number of times, local authorities, but they're reluctant to adopt a broader view as they're too overwhelmed and do not understand why supporting the ageing population is important.
Cost-benefit analysis and a poor cost-benefit analysis, I'm guessing. I don't think there's anything wrong with segmentation, or it's probably not the right word for it these days, but you know, it is a natural human desire to segment populations into either age or gender or purchase behaviors or where you live. It is a natural thing to do. So I try not to get too negative about that. And you know, coming from a business perspective, all organizations are going to know, well, how big is the market? You know, that's the first question they're going to ask. So how do you pull that market together and say 4 million people, you know, £1 million, 1 million, which you've got a budget to buy your product? They need to know that, or people aren't creating products or services. I think with local authorities, it's the cost benefit is very, very difficult. The cost is high and the benefit is grey. And the benefit is not always to the local authority. Sometimes mainly it's to the NHS. So they spend the money and another part of the public sector benefits. So it is very, very difficult. But one thing that is absolutely true is that having hit the age of 65, it does not give anybody anything in common with their parents who are 85 necessarily, you know. So this idea that it is 65 plus is a sort of demographic with similar interests is, of course, nonsense.
Thank you very much. I think, Eric, this leads perfectly into your presentation, doesn't it? I know, lined it up well.
Great. Yeah, no, so Colin, thanks for the setup, and Lucy, thanks for doing the nice bridge there, because I think you mentioned something there that I think is really important. You know, Rob asked the question, why do local authorities frame this as one stereotype? And I think I'll get into that. You know, because it is seen as a problem, you know, and I believe that it's sort of time to stop talking about all the problems and embrace what's coming. We need to address the problems. I'm not saying ignore them, but actually the fact that people are living longer is a miracle. In 1841, the average life expectancy was 41. Well, that's me done in 1841. And there's a lot more to live for. So the population is increasing. I won't throw statistics out because everyone's probably heard them again and again, but this image here really frames how government thinks about it, that the elderly people are a problem. And to be honest with you, it's not hard to see why. 60% of the UK population sees aging as a problem. They're not looking forward to it. I mean, this is a picture straight out of some advertising, Christmas advertising. This is an old person sitting on the moon. Okay, yes, there is loneliness. And I think the statistic is that there are 1.2 million people who don't have meaningful conversation with anyone in 30 days. That's awful, and we need to address that. But there are 12 million people over 65. That means 11 million people are out there not lonely. But this is the image. So there's a branding problem that the Aging Society has, and it's partly because, it's partly because the government needs a crisis to make things happen. And however, we were talking about local authorities and why they see it as a problem. They are leaving money on the table. They are not fully valuing the assets that are within their local area. So this is a national issue. We're talking it specifically. I live in East Sussex, next to the University of Sussex, and our local authority over-indexes on an aging population, but they undervalue these assets because they wind up having to pay for the social care bill, but they can't actually see the assets that are out there. And on a national basis, the over 50s in general own 70% of the UK wealth, and they're spending it. They spent 390 billion pounds in 2015 in the UK. They dominate most of the consumer spending. What I haven't updated on this slide is that actually they're driving a lot of the recovery post-COVID. The over 65s are spending it after COVID. Now, not everyone's the same. There's a really great piece of research done. The Center for Aging Better talked about 6 different segments, and I think one of them is about a quarter of the population that is excited and spending. There's another that is spending, but they're spending more out of being worried. But they're out there spending. So 2/3 of the population over 65 can really drive the economy. And the over 60 population is on track to generate half of all urban consumption in the next 15 years. Well, now we're in 2021, next 10 years. So they are important assets to the local economy. And they represent a really important resource for startups, not just money. Okay, this is somebody who went to Brighton Technical College, but she is investing in startups and provides a lot of skills. Two startups in the area, and actually age diverse workforces outperform all others. If you have the skills of an older staff person working with the skills of a younger one, they complement each other, and it's been shown in research to outperform that are purely young or purely old. So age diverse workforces, sources of investment, these are important assets in any part of the country in creating economic growth. More statistics on older people who are starting businesses, and they're starting them in droves. After COVID, the number of startups is unbelievable, partly because a lot of over 50s have been displaced. Now, some of the statistics work in their factor. A 50-year-old founder is nearly 2 times more likely to achieve higher end growth than a younger founder. Between 2001 and 2005, they created 27% of all businesses, while accounting for only 18% of the population, and they employ more staff. The ones on the right are, a bit tongue-in-cheek. Branson started younger, but he certainly continues to be entrepreneurial when he's thinking. But anyone who is an older entrepreneur tends to employ more staff. So just about employment, economic productivity goes beyond creating jobs. It's about support for the economy that is unpaid. They perform 23 billion pounds of caregiving, according to Age UK. 23 million hours of unpaid care a week, 1.2 billion hours a year. That saves the healthcare system 23 billion pounds a year. Nearly 1 in 3 people over 80 are carers, and that can be for a spouse, but they also care for younger kids. They enable mothers, single mothers, working mothers to go into the office. I can't tell you how many people I know that are in my immediate community that the grandmother takes care of the grandkids while the parents are at work. That's an important unvalued asset. And the fact that they're caring for another older adult or grandkid allows the sandwich generation to be employed. That's unvalued. And if a local authority wants to put people to work, they need to recognize of all of the unpaid work that's happening in their area, including volunteering. 63% of all volunteering done in the UK is done by the over 65s, which adds up to about 15 billion pounds. And here are some quotes from some local charities about working with older volunteers and how much commitment and loyalty they have. These are some of the skills that an older workforce can bring. I'm not saying everyone should be older in the workforce, but don't undervalue these skills. They provide 15 billion of volunteering and 23 billion of care. That's a massive amount to the UK GDP that is unvalued in the GDP, but are an important element of forming a strong community. So older as well as younger working together form a strong community and needs to be put forward as a place to invest. These are assets that any company would want when looking to an area to invest in. These are valuable assets that allow productivity. So I wanted to highlight what I think is undervalued in these areas, and local authorities need to know their worth, because right now they're focusing on the problems. Going back to Rob's issue, they see it as a bill to pay rather than recognizing what they're taking for granted in the 38 billion pounds of volunteering and care that's provided by this segment. So that's me, the assets of an aging population.
Thank you, Eric. I linked really nicely, Colin, with your graph around all that wisdom coming through and how we can really tap into that. So again, beautiful batting onto Eric there in terms of the content. And also, one thing that made me think of, Eric, is avoiding silos. They're obsessed with building retirement villages kind of outside of the village. I'm thinking about one just north of Ditchling at the moment, but so create, we want everybody of every age to be living together. And there's some wonderful examples of the impact that can have. Yeah.
And I think that's important. I mean, those communities exist because some people want to live in those communities, but at the same time, we need to be building more homes to allow them to stay in the community. And that's whether it's adapting the homes or creating age appropriate homes, what I call a 4-generation home that a 20-year-old or an 80-year-old could live equally comfortably in. And we need to do more to get home builders to buy into that 4-generation concept, because they're valuable assets to the community, and we need to stop treating it as a problem and recognize, stop taking for granted all of the unpaid work that's done, and recognize that they're important investors and employees.
Absolutely. We have another a long question from Rob there. So Rob, I agree the ageing population is a huge opportunity, particularly for the economy. There's a significant proportion of the ageing population that retire to the coast. This is where we are today. Many of these locations are economically deprived due to seasonal tourism and low-skilled jobs. Local authorities have grand ambitions to drive local community economies by trying to deliver a development that isn't attractive to businesses and therefore isn't delivered. So again, that's about the mindset, isn't it? About creating maybe business parks in that areas to get all these sort of slightly older entrepreneurs to.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think you're right. There's a lot to unpick in that, and I think I see Graham has joined us. Hi, Graham. Thanks for joining us. And I think, you know, one of the things that Graham will talk about is what the LEP is doing with, you know, they've written an industrial strategy and they're looking to get investment in the area. And I think, you know, it's about employment. It's also about their ability to spend in the particular area, and they're economically productive as consumers as well as employees. And I think that's the important thing to recognize here.
It's really how we engage in with that now. Graham, I know Graham's having slight technical issues. I don't know if you're able to. Are you with us, Graham?
I'm not sure. Am I? Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Graham Peters. I'm the chairman of Team East Sussex, which is a sub-board of the South East Local Enterprise Partnership. If you don't know what those LEPs are supposed to do, is to drive forward sustainable economic growth. South East LEP covers Essex, Kent and East Sussex. I'm sure somebody's already made the point that East Sussex in particular has a very skewed ageing demographic. And traditionally, as I say, my apologies because I haven't heard what's been said, so I'm probably going to repeat some of it. This has been regarded as a disadvantage. But I think the mindset hopefully is changing slightly, and particularly people like Eric are proselytizers for that change of mindset, and that's very exciting. So the LEP's position at the moment is that LEP actually hasn't got any money at the moment, so we're not actually doing anything very active. We're trying to influence, persuade, and make people think about a number of things in a different way, and the ageing demographic is one of them. Certainly at a personal level, but where in some cases with Eric's help, we're trying to influence developers to think more. Put together a site, and one Eric and I are working on is going to be 2,000 to 3,000 homes, and I think we persuaded a major house builder to look very seriously at some of the ideas that are emerging around dealing with ageing. That will be a triumph if we get there. Some way to go, yes, and money, of course, rears its ugly head. For me, Granny is not somebody that you can bundle up and stick in a home until she slips off the dish anymore. Granny, with a bit of luck, is wearing lycra and cycling, and actually probably noticeably fitter than I am. It's only because I'm an old age pensioner as well. And somewhere in there, we just have to acknowledge as a society, I'm getting a bit profound here, but as a society, but also from a business point of view, the enormous resource that we have in our pensioner population. And they're not all ready just to go off and have silver lunches and play golf every day. If we can garner the wisdom and the interest, the knowledge, the ability to care, bring that into more inclusive communities, everybody benefits, from the youngest children to the oldest participants. And that's around physical structure as much as attitudes as well. But if we haven't got physical structure right, I think I came on the tail end of somebody saying, there's a lovely old people saying, stuck on the outskirts of the village. Great, but where does the integration, where does the swapping of knowledge come from? So we think about approaching buildings in a different way. The LEP will be there to encourage. The industrial strategy says some stuff about it, but not as much as it might. and LEPs are changing their roles quite fast at the moment. We're under review by government. So where we will be in 6 months' time is going to be an interesting question. So I'm not sure we're certainly going to be influenced, I think. Whether we're going to be, I don't know. Just to finish, I had supper with an Australian friend last night. Her mother lives in a complex to the east of Sydney, which is a sort of, I think it's a 3 or 4 story block of flats on top of the most extraordinary mall with a supermarket in it, with coffee shops. Most of the people who live in that block are older. They come down, they're part, they meet together, they meet the rest of the world down there. And it's just such an exciting example as opposed to this ghettoization, which was it Lucy? I'm not sure. As I said, it was all concentrating earlier on. And we need to work towards all those sorts of different approaches, urban and rural, going forward. If the LEP and Team East Sussex can help or make introductions, we will. Thank you.
No, thank you, Graham. So do you see it sounds like your role is very much influencing and educating, almost to show that the construction industry, that this is a massive opportunity that they are missing, because their traditional practices are these blocks of sort of quite dull looking properties, which we wouldn't be inspired to move here. Going back to Colin's point at the beginning, is where would we like to live, right now, not where would we stick our mother, which was quite shocking. It turned out wasn't that great. So you inspire them to build places that are aspirational for any generation, that happen to be focused at retirees. Graham?
I think it's that sort of approach we're trying to take. I mean, different horses for different courses. The site that Eric and I in particular are thinking is a big one for 2,000 to 3,000 houses. And if we can make a change there, well. But I was talking to somebody the other day in a completely different context who wants to try to build modular houses for life on the outskirts of a village in East Sussex. I haven't even told Eric about that. Whether that's a realisable ambition will depend on the willingness of the local authority to take a different approach to A, planning generally, B, planning on the edge of a village site, because it's not going to be the sort of thing normally viable in standard developers' terms. But yes, I think we've all got a role in that. But the further I, wearing my little hats, and people like Eric and I guess the rest of you on the call, but I missed the introduction, forgive me, I'm sorry. The more we can push that message out, the more we're likely to get somewhere successful and move forwards. And it's a huge opportunity. I got the tail end of Eric as well. It's just, how can we have neglected it?
Eric, go on, sorry, Colin.
I was just going to say, having spent sort of 6 or 7 years working in sort of dementia care and retirement villages for a dementia care company, we started off thinking we were going to drop these great big spaceships in fields in the middle of the green belt, and everybody's going to be perfectly happy. And we learned very quickly they weren't. We didn't get to build any, but it's not what people wanted. And there's good economic reasons why people might leave London and go to the coast. If you can sell your family home and downsize and release a whole bunch of equity to improve your pension and retirement, then of course, and if you're interested in fishing and sailing, then that makes a great deal of sense as well. But what we're finding is that people with a certain amount of money, why would you leave London? London is a huge playground. There's this mass amount of things to do with an easy reach, with a great transport system. So the developments we ended up working on and developing were in Clapham Junction and Kew and Hammersmith, because that's where people wanted to live. So I think we'll see a progressive shift in that area. Again,
don't generalise that we're not all going to retire to the sea. Eric, I was going to ask you, when you're having these conversations, do the construction industry see the opportunity? Do they appreciate the scale of the revenue available here?
That's an interesting question. Yes, they see it. How do you realize the return on the investment? I mean, that's really what it comes down to. And Colin and I have robust discussions about this. I think it's interesting. You sell more homes if you provide attractive homes. They have to be something that is inclusive, but beautiful. You don't lose your aesthetic just because you turn 60, 65, just the, people tend to invest in things they really find valuable. So I think, I do think developers hear what's going on, but they really look for where's the return on investment. And there's a number of ways that people are trying to do that. One way is through a retirement community, and they charge a lot in some of these retirement communities. They provide a lot. Some of these retirement communities are absolutely fantastic places to live, and frankly, anyone should want to live in them. But to that point, why don't you open it up and have an inclusive neighborhoods? Because then you have, then it's easy for you to drop off your kid and go to work, whoever you might be. And that is harder to do in a fenced off community rather than being integrated into the community. And so developers are saying, I understand for a healthy home, you might want to make doorways wider, hallways wider, but that makes the bedroom smaller. And I need to charge less for a home that has a smaller bedroom. What's the return on that? Well, if I have a kite mark that says this is a healthy home, that might work. And so there's some talk in the industry around a kite mark, around a healthy age home. And on page 178 of the NHS long range plan, it says NHS will create a kite mark for a healthy home. And they have just updated in December last year, Homes for Life. Now it's called Healthy Homes for Life. They added the healthy bit to the Homes for Life. And I think there's a lot more work to do. And frankly, people make a place, not the physical. Winston Churchill said, we create places and then places shape us. We shape places and then places shape us. And it's very much along those lines. People make a place. The physical environment creates opportunities for us, but it's ultimately people that make a place, and communities are made of people. And that's part of what Colin and Graham and I are talking to builders about, is engaging people so that whatever they're designed for is used. Places are easier to sell when they're desirable and people have good, strong communities. Red Road did a piece of research and said there is a return on community investment. So if you do these kinds of things and you invest in community, there is a return on investment. Red Road needs to do a lot more to implement some of their own research. So there's a lot more work to be done. But that's a long-winded answer to your question, but it's an important one because frankly, that's what makes the world go round.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Eric. And last but not least, Natasha, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, everybody. Yeah, thanks. I'm afraid, so this is the first time I'm joining this conversation, and I'm afraid I might sound very different from everybody else. But I was trying, because I'm just joining this debate, I'm trying to kind of, at the same time as talking, understand what's being discussed prior to me. And for me, what's interesting is, I want to think about responsibility. Who is responsible for happy aging, and how the conversation has been unfolding until now. I think we kind of have all these talents. We're responsible for our happy aging. We have assets. We have things to offer in terms of investment, in terms of wisdom, in terms of experience, in terms of consumption potential. So we have all that, and it's just up to some, and then somebody recognizes it. It's either going to be government or council or society as a whole, and then we, as a result of that, have a happy old age. Because and so what's interesting, it raises questions around, why is it we're going to have happy old age? And of course, if you look at the literature, what would the literature argue? Because what it enhances is your self-esteem, your contribution to your community, your participation, your sense of self-respect, the self-esteem. If you become part of something, this is an important primary condition for our self-esteem. Yeah, and so it kind of sounds as a very happy picture. But I think I want to maybe think about it from a slightly different perspective. How can it fail? So of course it's got all this potential, and we want to enhance this potential and to develop this potential. But what the conditions under which it might fail? And I would have to relate it to my research, because that's the only thing I know anything about. Otherwise, I'll be talking about something I don't know much about. And so my research has also been looking at transition, but this transition was very much linked to the employment. So what we specifically looked at, we looked at the transition after deindustrialization and how people who were already older people, so we're not talking about over 60, we're talking about over 50, found themselves in the period of life that they didn't have jobs. They didn't have jobs, they stayed in the same careers for 30 years, then as a result of industrialization, those jobs disappeared, and they find themselves having to somehow refigure their own life. And so we looked from multiple aspects. It was funded by the British Academy, this research, and we looked at all kinds of frustrations and challenges and opportunities of refiguring your life. And it was mainly linked, of course, to employment, because these people were looking for employment. And so, and we only looked at men. We specifically, and I think we're kind of one of the arguments why we looked at men is that self-respect and self-esteem much closer linked to work opportunities for men traditionally, historically. So what I would like to think about then, based on the findings in our research, so we find ourselves in the moment of transitioning. So what forms of contribution, not just what forms of contribution lead to our self-esteem, enhanced self-esteem, but also what forms of contribution are available to us. And so in our case, most of this, because what's frightening about old age is very much independent. So again, I have to be careful about research with them, because these people would find themselves in this situation when they have to work for living. So we're looking at transitions for people not who can afford the retirement, not who can move to the seaside, not who would buy a house, expensive house in London because they don't want to leave London because London has got so much to offer. We're looking at people who are actually aging and they have to work. They have to work because that's the only way they can survive. And what are opportunities for healthy aging is then for those people? And so what we found is what made and what is effect of those opportunities on their well-being. So what we found is their main concern was anxiety-provoking condition was not being able to access work when you're older, and knowing the difficulty of accessing work when you're older. And in some ways, in many ways, it's linked to what the conversation was about before, that there is misconceptions among employers that older workers might not be as productive, older workers might not last as long, older workers is going to have more sick leave days. So from that point of view, so the challenge of kind of finding employment was something that was definitely the most anxiety-provoking and stable employment. What our research was actually, they all wanted to work, they all wanted to continue to work, and they saw work as a source of meaning in their lives. And at the same time, which was quite curious, they also felt guilty because there was such huge anxiety about not being able to find work. So many of them articulated that they felt guilty taking up jobs, that older people actually feel that they might be hindering opportunities for younger people if they take up too many jobs. So that's again something that probably needs to be debated and discussed, to what extent, because of the sense of pressure that if I continue working, if I get this job, that to what extent it might deprive somebody else of opportunities to work. The other, of course, of frustration was, of course, precarity of work, and to what extent they, because of course what has become more important for them, or became more important for them in a late age, is feeling to being in control of their own lives, to kind of being able to plan for the future. And what we found is that something that anxiety-provoking for older workers is the sense they need more stability in work, because they want to know when they can retire, what their pensions are going to be, what housing they'll be able to afford. The stability has become significantly more important. So the lack of access to work was probably one of the most important discussions that we did have. In the second discussion, again, when you're old days, the quality of work and how we defined how we define this concept of job quality. And for them, of course, it was a very specific case, because we were observing an example, we were witnessing an example of moving from skilled labor to less skilled labor. And very often when you enter employment later, again, you don't necessarily always enter as an investor, you don't necessarily always enter as starting your own business startup, but very often you enter into jobs which are less skilled jobs from what you started. And again, that raises concerns around kind of sense of achievement and self-respect and self-esteem, because you don't get recognized as much. And the older we are, the more we want to get recognized, and therefore an element of recognition is important. And what was interesting, and I think that's the conversation was just picking up, not just in relation to the pandemic, but the society as a whole, this whole idea of how we define merit, because how we define success, how we define happiness, yeah? Because, and unfortunately, what happened with our case, that participants did complain about it, and we had multiple studies about it, that very often happy aging is defined through happy consumption. Happy aging is defined from moving to a nicer part of the country, where in our case they couldn't do it, and they wanted to be recognized for to what extent they remained useful to society, they remained useful to communities, because their jobs were unskilled work, they were not well-paid jobs, but they were useful. Most of them were in key workers, what we call essential workers now positions. And so their invitation was so much more about thinking that society needs to rethink what merit is. Society doesn't necessarily have to always think about upgrading or upskilling or retraining or getting new skills to become more useful, but maybe sometimes we need to actually reassess the utility or usefulness of jobs that people already have and people continue to perform. And very often this usefulness remains invisible. So for me, the debate of happy aging, it's not just the debate of better houses, it's not just the debate of to what extent we contribute to the consumption, but to what extent we contribute to how merit, how your contribution to society could be defined in multiple terms, which is not just linked to economic measurement, not just linked to how much you consume, but also consume to what extent you're prepared to continue to contribute. Even your contribution might be seen, for example, out of date. You might not be technologically advanced. And this is something that came across a lot, where people were saying, we don't feel recognized because we feel obsolete. We feel we're not keeping up with upskilling. We're not keeping up with, but you still need us. So from that point of view, there are lots of jobs people do and can contribute to, but we maybe have to rethink the value of those jobs, and it will make their aging much happier.
Natasha, that was intense, and I'm really insightful. But Eric's got a question, so Eric, I'll come straight to you.
Yeah, thanks, Natasha. Lots of really interesting content in there that I wanted to touch on a couple of topics that you had mentioned. One was you'd made a comment about, and I wanted to understand a little bit more of the context. You'd said that older employees felt that they were taking the job of younger employees.
Yeah, they said, this is what came up. I mean, it was surprising findings. We didn't. There was a sense, because there was because of their histories, and I think that was very much a specific group of people, because they went to the history of multiple being made redundant multiple times. Because of it was the aftermath of the industrialization. They felt that the longer they stayed working, the fewer jobs there will be for their children.
Yeah, well, so there's some recent research that show that's a myth. I can't quote it off the top of my head. I was going to try and do a quick search while you were talking, and then I realized research skills aren't probably that quick. But I have seen that lots of that older employees are not taking the jobs to the point right now. You get into cycles, and I think you have to. The answer to that question may depend on when you ask it. That might have been true in the 60s and 70s, but right now, we don't have enough employees. And as a matter of fact, big corporations, you're seeing a lot more corporations looking at how they create an inclusive environment for work for full employees. So BMW was an example. They were terrified of their highly experienced manufacturing line all retiring at the same time. And so they adapted the manufacturing line for the cars to accommodate for some of the call it common complaints of aging. And what they found was that everyone was more productive. The younger employees as well as the older employees were more productive. So one, they were needed because of the skills that they had. And two, it made everyone more productive by creating an inclusive environment. The other thing that I was going to add to this was that.
Now, can I just make a comment before?
Yeah.
Can I? I think what the point I was trying to make, of course, we were not talking about, I wasn't drawing on statistics to what extent it's true. It was the perception, and of course, that's precisely the point, that this perception needs to be challenged, but the perception still exists and until now. And the perception is not because people don't understand or they don't know. I think because of the precarity of different forms of employment at the moment, there is a sense that any job can land. So from that point of view, it's not so much about saying that that's how it is, and we don't have any evidence to suggest that. But what we do say that this understanding exists, and among certain groups, it still prevails.
There is evidence that shows some of the most ageist people are an older generation.
Yeah, of course, yeah, definitely. I can see that. Yeah, I can see that.
And it's partly because that's the environment they grew up in. That's the way it was for them. That's the way it was for their grandparents and their parents. But guess what? Right now the world has changed a lot, and so now actually companies are looking at how they can make their workforce more flexible. What's really interesting, what happened with the pandemic, everyone is talking about work from home, this work-life home balance. This is exactly what an older population has been looking for when it comes to an age-friendly workforce. Allow someone to work from home for a little while, have a flexible, that also works for new parents. These are all things that are happening outside of the ageist discussion that make it really good for all employees. I did want to bring one other thing in, and Colin's probably more of an expert on this than I am, which is around the skills of older workforce. And you were talking about skills of an older workforce. In particular, I think they were talking about sympathy and empathy for customers. Being able to empathize with a customer tends to be a skill that's stronger in an older population, whereas if you are younger, you may not have those sort of life experiences to sort of help you understand the customer situation. And so there was, I don't know if it was B&Q or Homebase. Colin, I think, knows the story. But they've gone out and deliberately hired older people for that exact reason, which is exact opposite of what their competition was doing. Sorry, you were going to say something?
Colin, your thoughts?
Yeah, he's ready to dive in.
For my sins, early in my career, I was head of design at Homebase. We had a mantra of, employing what were rather insultingly known as Saturday girls. And that referred to the boys as well, actually, but just sort of casual, very young workers, minimum wage, come in, sit in the tills, stack shelves. And as an employee, part of your induction was to spend a month in store. And every Christmas, you had to spend 2 weeks in store to help out. And walking around Homebases in green dungarees, getting abused by customers, and I literally mean verbally abused on a daily basis, was just what we experienced. and you know, the turnover in staff was huge. Sickness was just, you know, was huge, and those that did make it in were usually frequently hungover. You know, it was, you know, saying, you know, these are all anecdotes, of course, but B&Q had a completely opposite one. They employed a much older workforce, and they didn't pay them too much more. Absenteeism wasn't higher, but what they got free of charge were experts in DIY. You know, and their staff were respected more by the customers. Their advice was sought, it was listened to. It was a totally different culture in the stores between our, in theory, middle-class home decorating and B&Q's kind of roughy-tufty DIY builder store. But they had the better culture and the better environment, because they played with all the skills, the wisdom that these people had accrued over their whole lifetime to help them advise and give advice, which is what people want from a member of staff when they go into store.
Yeah, absolutely. And Natasha, I've got a couple of questions for you in the chat. I mean, I was thinking about what you were saying about those people who do perceive they're taking jobs from the young, and linking it to Colin's presentation about how we can empower some of those young who are floundering with what they want to do, and have like that mentoring and that support. And you talked about multi-generational workplaces. It's how you can bring them into the mix to feel that they're nurturing the future rather than preventing it. There's a massive opportunity there. They bring so many life skills. But a couple of questions to you from Nora. So actually, Natasha, I'll go with the second one. You said it was mainly focused on men, that research. Have you seen any research on the same sort of field that focuses on women?
We obviously there is similar research in women, because we were looking at particular occupations, and these occupations could be performed by both women and men. Yeah, there is some research on, but I think again, because that's why I started the conversation about self-esteem and self-respect, and where the sources of and there are multiple sources of self-respect, and work is not the only one. And so we draw on different sources of self-respect and self-esteem. So some of us would draw on our professional careers, some of us would draw on our families, children. And so, and what, I haven't done this research myself, but in comparison, what we did find that men are drawing on works, again, in particular types of occupations, men still are drawing on work more as a source of self-esteem. So women were more successful in kind of dealing with their frustration by compensating them by drawing on their families, drawing on their children. Okay, I worked, I lost a job, I can't transition, but I have time to spend with my grandchildren, or I have time. So they kind of, for them, family was much more a source of, and the men took pride in providing for their family, still very traditional understanding of manhood and masculinity, but they didn't use this resource as much as to justify the precarity of work. For them, precarity of work was still anxiety provoking.
And the second question, Nora, is I've read a few reports recently that have highlighted the impact COVID and lockdown has had on older workers. I wonder whether the panel had a view on this and what the impact might have on living a good life as people get older. We kind of touched on this, didn't we? Are you saying about flexible working and that already playing to the strengths of everybody, not just aging? But Colin, do you want to pick that one up? Do you want to start off with your thoughts on that question?
Yeah, well, I think like all of us, and again, this, I don't think this is specifically an aging thing, but with all of us, we've learned that all those things we were told about not being able to work from home were all rubbish. You know, we've all managed to survive for a year and a half working from home. I haven't been into the office since like February last year. So it's just not true. Now, there are things that maybe happen better in teams in person and in groups, and there's going to be a more of a blended approach, I think, when we all go back. And I think that will favour older workers who are trying to transition, particularly, as Natasha says, you're trying to transition into new types of careers. And it's not just, obviously, you know, it's easy to think about white collar work. There's people working on building sites in manual labor and physical labor in the care sector with a lot of lifting and physical labor, that you get to a certain age, and because of physical frailties and the wear and tear in your body, you can't continue to do that work anymore. And if you haven't made it to management level, then you have to transition into some other sort of career. And that, I think, we're going to start seeing. I would like to see, and it's a big remit of ours, is look at the actual policy around recruitment. Even at the Royal College, I've recruited a job share for one of our senior design management posts, looking at two people who were quite interested in working 2 or 3 days a week, didn't really want a full-time job, had a bit of a portfolio career, but wanted to mix things up. So we said, well, right, okay. We found it really hard to recruit them on a job share. They're trying to find a legal contract or an employment contract that specifies a job share, which I think is the way I would want to work as I get older. I don't want to work 40 hours a week when I'm 60, 70. But it's actually really difficult. So these policies and these procedures need to be put in place. And it's not just physical environment, it's not just transport, it's also just the policies around recruitment.
And again, I'd also challenge that there are people who are younger who quite like the idea of having maybe 2 or 3 roles that are a couple of days each. So blended working as well as portfolio careers. There are graduates coming out who don't want to be in a job for 10, 20 years. They want to try lots of things. They want to have a diverse range of experiences. So I think for all ages, flexibility has been discussed a heck of a lot over the last 18 months, but what does it really look like? And how do we stop us going back to the 9-to-5 presenteeism structure? We've proven, as you said, we don't need that anymore. So how do we break it apart?
Well, I think it's policy, and that's one of the things that this age thing, we'll be shouting about, is that there needs to be a change. Then you need to be able to walk into any job and say, here's how I want to work. Sorry, Eric.
Go on, Eric.
Yeah, I think that's an important point. I was talking about BMW earlier, but the same problem was faced by utility companies across Europe. In the 50s, Europe was rebuilding its infrastructure. We were rebuilding our electricity grid, rebuilding our water grid, rebuilding telephone networks, all of that after the war. And all of the assets, the human assets that built those networks, are about to walk out the door. And there's a real issue around providing support for apprentices. So, what would be a great idea is to have someone at home, maybe with a VR headset, supporting an apprentice out in the field. I've never seen this, Boiler 2000, walk them through, and some of these already exist. There are these systems. But the thing that's holding those kinds of solutions back is the legal side. The technology's there, but the pension or the company employment rules prevent them from going back and working for the company they just retired from. And that's where some of the legal changes need to happen. So they're needed, but HR policy gets in the way.
And there is a skills challenge there, because you're right. We went through a period in the early 90s where every polytechnic became a university and got obsessed with academia and pushing people to get degrees, and all the polys stopped doing the carpentry, the brick. Now they're all coming back. We've got some amazing practical colleges, but there's a bit of a gap. So we've got a period where we weren't training as many people into those roles. So I've known some amazing carpentry companies who, as you say, have all got aging populations, and there's a generation that's almost missing, but there are younger people now trying to get back into it, which is good. We're seeing it come back round as being required.
The average average age of a construction worker in America is like in the 50s, maybe late 50s. Who's going to do that work? They're already behind it. We're not building enough homes here in the UK. We're supposed to be building 300,000 homes a year, and we're building a third or a half of that. It's even worse over there. Who's going to do this work?
It links into what Natasha was saying about sort of merit and worthy. We somehow along the line stopped respecting people who are practical. You had to be academic, and that's ridiculous. I mean, go on, Natasha.
There is a book that's just been very recently written by one of the most famous in the millennium philosophy. It was called The Tyranny of Meritocracy. And it's very much arguing exactly that not only we're recognizing degrees only, but we're now becoming even more narrow in our understanding of merit. We're recognizing only degrees from particular universities, and the kind of the gap between the practical skill and the particular education, not just any education, is growing. But I think if I can go back to what Colin is saying, I think there are a couple of issues, and that's why maybe I was talking about what I was talking, because one of the arguments is that after the pandemic, in a recent McKinsey report, that quite a few people, more than 25% more than was initially estimated, will have to change occupations. So there will be decrease, especially, say, for example, office support. As I said, we won't need as much office support. We'll be working from home. Some of them most of them are low, not highly paid occupations. But so there is idea, if you want to stay active, and if you understand active as productive towards the economy, or contributing or participating, that there will be this idea, I will have to change my occupation. And again, that raises questions about, okay, what occupations we merit, what occupations we value, what occupations we favor, and how comfortable people might be entering the occupations. You see what Colin was saying, how it's for people, like her, or also Eric was giving example how older workers were better with customers. Yes, that's absolutely true. However, at the same time, people who came from engineering and ended up, especially men, and ended up in retail, felt uncomfortable providing a service which was seen as feminine for them, so those things are happening at the same time. It's very much about our understanding of professionalism, our understanding of contribution, our understanding of usefulness, our understanding of femininity, masculinity, and we have to debate those things to make people comfortable in multiple jobs they might find themselves in. And so that's one of the argument about the pandemic, that unfortunately, the other, in response to Colin, okay, lots of what we found, that lots of older workers wanted to go to work for social interactions. And if we're all working from home now, that will be disadvantage for older workers, because for that, what was important, somebody we were talking about lost the job, and he said, I just went to bus stops and talked to people because I miss talking to people. And he had family, he had a wife and 2 children, so it wasn't the question of him being lonely or somehow antisocial. It's social interaction is one of the main drivers for people to actively participate in workforce when they're older.
Yeah, they often say that, once you've walked through the door on day one, you just forget what you're getting paid. You don't think about it every single day. I've made X pounds. You go to work for the merit of the work and the intrinsic reward of doing something positive, and for social interaction. And as I age, and I've thought about this, and I want to change my job, I'm thinking I'll just work in a pub. Not because I have to,
because people
I get to meet a lot of people every day, and I'm the guy behind the bar that you've got to talk to. And it's also cheaper that side of the bar than the other side of the bar, I've discovered. But I mean, I did it as a kid, through college, as a lot of people do. You pay your way through by working in bars and that sector. You think that's the sort of work you want. You want social interaction. That's why you grow up. That's the thing that's taken away from you as you age, as your children move away and your parents die and your family get dispersed one way or t'other. That's the main motivation. The money is, of course, always useful. But my greatest fear is to get trapped in my home, living alone with nobody to talk to. Not poverty.
And if I could just add to that, I mean, I think the social side of it, I think, is really important. People, the flexible environment. If everyone's working from home, I mean, I think speak to Amazon or Microsoft. They're all asking them to come back in full time now. But I think there will be a hybrid environment, and I think. Yes, there is that social side of it, but that's why volunteering is so popular, actually. Or they want to be involved even if they're not getting paid. Like you said, Colin, they're not, those people literally aren't thinking of getting paid. But it's being social.
Well, I was thinking about volunteer. I was going to mention, but I also thought, Natasha, about what you said around a lot of people need to work financially still. We've talked a lot of maybe this aging well. And where's the line? Where is it? It's a luxury for some people to age well. Some people need to work. Some people haven't got great pensions. They can't afford to live on maybe what they could get from the state. And that's maybe the uncomfortable conversation here, which Natasha, which I love that as you say, you wanted to give the other perspective of it. How do we empower those people? How do we help them to find meaningful work that also pays them when they've got to an age where they're being perceived as not useful anymore, which is horrific as a sentence.
I mean, for me, I don't know whether that was for Natasha, but I think Natasha has said a lot, and I agree with it entirely, this idea of merit, and I don't know whether it's the British class system or what have you, but, I suppose people would think certain jobs are beneath them. You know, is that all your life's amounted to? You're working in the local pub, you know, as opposed to, no, I don't need to work in the local pub. I choose to work in the local pub, or whatever it might be. There is a stigma attached.
No, but that's very true. I think you're absolutely correct in this using choose, because if people feel that they have choice, then they enjoy jobs. You know, they are much more comfortable working into different jobs and performing different tasks. And that's why it is that, but the moment you have no choice, it's having options for people and providing more options. That makes it much more enjoyable, because there's that sense of being stuck in some job, not being able to do without this job, being afraid to lose this job. That's what creates or generates frustration. The older you are, more, because of course then you become more vulnerable.
Yes, because if I lose this job, no one else will hire me. They won't value my
People
skills.
say that's exactly what they say. They feel sometimes I hate what I'm doing. I think sack me, and then I think I'll never find another job.
So as you say, Colin, that goes back to what you're saying, the whole cultural re-education of employers. This is a massive task about just appreciating that if you're 60, you could be an asset to that company for another 10 years, if you know more. It's, you know, or as long as they want to be. How do we change that culture of getting that nice mix? And then you've got great examples. I think that helps, doesn't it?
I think it's really, I mean, I think it is really difficult, you know, because it's something that's been imprinted on us for, you know, my entire life. That you know, that classic sort of, you must aspire to X, Y, and Z, you know, do good at school, get some sort of qualification. You know, if you don't do well, you'll end up doing the bins. You know, as if there's anything wrong with being, you know, refuge collector. You know, but there is that perception in our society that some jobs are to be looked down upon and others are to be aspired to, and it's almost entirely to do with money.
Yes.
You know, and not to do with actually what you're contributing to society.
And that feels like that's changed quite recently, because we don't seem to respect firemen, and you see sort of attacks on the street of
ambulance workers and
horrific. I don't know where that's come from. Go on, Eric, so on.
Well, I was just going to say the pandemic's been awful, but it's been an amazing experiment in social psychology. You know, we talked about the great pick for Britain. You know, we weren't going to have enough workers to pick the fields, and fruit was going to rot in the fields until we had to bring Romanians back to pick the fields. You know, we tried, there was all sorts of effort to try and get local people to pick in Britain, and we couldn't. And the ones that did show up lasted a day and went home.
It was too hard for them, wasn't it? Yeah, I saw that.
Unbelievable. And it's not just agriculture, it's lots of jobs like that.
Again, I think that goes back to just celebrating what you're good at. And if you're great at building things, we don't celebrate that enough. Go on, Colin, what are your thoughts?
I was just going to say there are some things that physically you can't do. I don't know. You know, I worked in a farm a little bit for a friend when I was young, and it is hard toil, you know. And even just picking, you know, these days I could not pick for Britain because my back just wouldn't take it. It's not bad, but spending all day in a field picking strawberries, it just wouldn't take it. So physically, there are some jobs that you do get to a point you can't do. And I think we need to just recognize that and accept it, and, you know, accept the limitations. But there are other jobs that anybody can do. It's this idea that somebody be looked down upon, as if, you know, some people are less worthy than others, or have less worth because they build the houses that you live in. You know, it seems madness to me, but it's still prevalent, I think.
I'm going to go pick wine at the local vineyard. You'll see.
You've got a motivation there, haven't you? Yes, I can tell.
Yeah, well, I noticed you didn't say pick grapes, Eric. You said you just
straight to wine.
Yes.
But we put old people in the same boat, don't we? So unskilled, as we call them. I mean, that's a great start, isn't it? It's actually, they've got different skills. There are still skills involved in doing all these things. It's just not a recognised certificate. And, you know, you get to a certain age, and as you say, you're put in this, as you said, you're frail and you're this and that. It's like, no, actually, you're just an age, you're just a number. But yeah, this is a massive cultural change to try and implement, isn't it?
But it's one of the things we talk about in aging, the language around aging is horrific, you know, and it does stigmatize and stereotype and create prejudice. And the language around work is the same, as you say, skilled labor, unskilled. I even used it myself, white collar. I'm not even sure what it entirely means, but black, you know, brown collar and blue collar and all the rest. And it's all just a little bit.
We love being lazy and putting people in big silos, don't we? Let's just group everybody and you're frail, you're decrepit. It's all these things rather than you've lived till 80, amazing. You've got your vineyard, whatever it may be, you know.
I'll work there.
That's it. Eric's going to lead by example.
You've still got a lot to contribute.
Yes.
And that's the thing. But there are things that you can't do. But that's why I made the point that, you know, only 25% or 26% of people have a severe difficulty, you know, with a household daily activity over the age of 65. But that's the bit we focus on for some reason. You know, we seem to obsess about negative and focusing on what's bust rather than celebrating and really applauding what's working. And I think that's possibly part of the human condition. I don't know, but it's something we need to be very conscious of when we talk about this agenda.
Well, we love going to Japan and talking about their aging population, don't we? Have a different. If you're Japanese and old, you're amazing, but if you're British and old, you're a problem. We love going to Japan and focusing on what they eat and how they live until their hundreds.
I blame William Shakespeare.
For everything?
His idea of King Lear really has put a couple people off. But no, more seriously, I mean, I think charities need to raise money, and therefore they, you know, Age UK raises huge amounts of money selling loneliness. And you know, I power to them, right? They're doing a very important job, but they are not helping with the brand of aging. You know, government talks about the healthcare system, and most of the health spend is at end of life. Well, they're terrified of the bill that's about to arrive. You know, pensions. This is what I was trying to talk about earlier. Crises are for governments. That's when you get their backs are against the wall and they've got to do something. You know, it's hard for them to make two good choices. It's easy for, you know, if they've got a crisis and they're forced to do something, because then, you know, they're seen as helping out. And so they paint these things as a crisis, but that's not how you sell homes. That's not how you know, create a great restaurant. So I think this is where we need to reframe. Colin talked about it in terms of the rewards and focusing on rewards. And I think that's really important. Culture has not caught up with science. People are living longer, but it's seen as a problem. And we need that it's ageism at work, at home. And we need to start young, frankly. You know, we're getting through climate change because of what they're educating some of the younger generation. Even in America, the young Republicans, believe it or not, if that's ever an oxymoron, but you know, the young Republicans are talking about the need for doing something about climate change. Well, you know, that we need to do the same when it comes to healthy aging, because it really is a life course.
We need role models. We need people.
Yeah.
We need people that we work with. You know, those mentors. The best way to dispel all those negative cliches is to actually experience the positive.
So Stanford has something they call the life map, and there's a hole in the life map where there are no role models because no one's lived that long. You know, there's this, so we need to create those role models. And I think that's quite important. So, you know, there's some interesting work at Stanford that I would reference. And I think that, you know, celebrating the successes of an aging population, but, you know, the people who are aging now created the internet. You know, they're the ones who drove a lot of the sexual revolution. They're used to driving revolutionary change, and the change in aging is just the next to change.
Yeah, they're not, hopefully aren't going to stand for being put into a box and treated as their parents were potentially. Yeah, absolutely. But I agree, it's an evolution of taste and experience. But we're going to need to wrap up. Thank you to my panel. I think that was wonderful. Now, we'll put the other links into the Possibility Club as well, just so we can keep that conversation going. And I said, this is the final one of our project. So what I wanted to do is just wrap it up, just reminding everybody who's listening that this is the Aging Well project. This has brought together a host of activities, research and content. And as a part of this, we set up a community event on our content hub called the Possibility Club. Annie Marie will pop the link into that. So please come and join us. There's a whole conversation going on in that circle. There's a community of people and organisations interested in discussing and debating and disrupting. You probably gather we'd like to have a debate. You know, this isn't the easy topic. It's a huge topic. You know, how we age well in inverted commas. So it's a place to share ideas, build collaboration. So come and talk to us. Come and share your experiences or any research you think is pertinent, and come and be a part of this conversation. And it's all free, and it gives you permission to disrupt the way we think and think about and do aging well. So there's some cutting edge research in there, some business innovation, grassroots practice in the community, and individual lived experience. We've had such a range of people on the podcast and the webinars from all different perspectives, which obviously makes such a rich perspective. And very finally, this project was funded by the University of Sussex and the Economic and Social Research Council to help translate academic knowledge into action. The activity is facilitated by Always Possible, that's who I work for, a unique consultancy looking at the 21st century problem solving through connected conversation. And so these events are all run in partnership with Always Possible, which is who's running the Possibility Club. And I really want to thank you all for coming and being a part of the conversation, and I hope to continue to have this with you. So thank you, Colin, for saying it's fantastic. We've enjoyed it. These are always good, aren't they? There's so much we could be talking about. We did go off on a few tangents, but you know, that's also the nature of the beast. But thank you all very much and have a good rest of the day.